Hey, what's going on? Chad.
How's it going?
What's up, man? I didn't expect you to be calling for a space today, but here we are.
Well, we haven't done one in a
I
few
know.
weeks, holidays and all, and just kind of things. And I don't like to go like long periods of time without doing a space. Like I like to keep the a consistency about this stuff, so we can keep an engagement with our own community and such.
Yeah, for sure, man. I like to do them. I wasn't planning on doing anything, but then I'm like, man, like I mean, I like doing them, so I definitely don't mind hopping on. Yeah, there just hasn't been much going on. Been just enjoying some time. Hope everyone's having a good holiday season, hanging out and everything. And yeah, cool people just come on such a short notice. So thanks for hopping on. What you been up to, Chad? Anything interesting?
No, not much interesting. Just kind of, you know, doing the holidays and such. I don't really have any plans for New Year's. You have any plans for New Year's? I got nothing going on myself, so I don't know. Maybe I'll just sit my ass and watch a movie, but or maybe I'll go out. Who knows?
Yeah, New Year's is always crazy because I mean, if you go out anywhere, there's just so many people. It's a mob scene no matter where you go.
Right, right. And like that always just kind of ruins it in some ways. Just like when you have like just fighting large crowds all the time. Just it's never fun.
Yeah, that's easily the worst part about like major holidays and stuff. Just
Yeah,
crowds of people, dude. It's so terrible. It doesn't really matter what
yeah,
you're doing either. It's anywhere that's a public space.
yeah. I remember like there was just people talking about Christmas in New York, and that's where I live, as you know. And like people were like trying to share like Instagram videos of like oh look, I'm at Rockefeller Center or whatever the hell it is, but they always just film the video in a way that doesn't show the massive fucking crowds that are just like look terrible and awful, and so they just kind of like crop all that shit out.
Oh, dude, anyone that goes to Times Square on New Year's, that's like, I don't know. You're just there to be an extra on TV, essentially. Like, it's kind of
Pretty
crazy.
much.
Like, I don't know
I
who would
mean,
willingly do that. It's cold. I feel like it's warmer out now than it ever used to be. But like I
well,
remember it used to be freezing on New Year's. You're out there all day. You can't even you can't do anything. And then the ball drops. And
right.
you're just like, all right, well, just time to go home.
If you want to watch the ball drop in New York, like you don't just show up to the ball like 10 minutes before it drops, whatever. You have to like get a seat and you have to like sit there for like 9 hours or something fucking wacky
I,
just to watch that ball drop.
yeah, I didn't think there was seats either. I think you just show up and you just stand there
You
for
just you
nine
just stand there
hours.
for hours with the silly glasses on.
Oh,
Wait,
my number one pet peeve is those glasses past 2009. It doesn't work. Like, all right, the design made sense for 2000 to 2009. After that period, maybe 2010, you could get away with it. You put the one in between the two eyes, but anyone that's rocking the glasses, uh, it doesn't make sense anymore. I don't get it. They just kept making them
yeah.
past 2009.
Well, they make good money on them, I guess. Everybody just buys them and
Oh
tosses
yeah,
them.
it's amazing
They
marketing
probably
idea.
they probably cost about 12 cents to make, and they sell them for like $30.
Yeah, and it works every single time. But
Yeah,
the audacity to keep producing them past '09, they couldn't come up with a better design. They just put eye holes in around the numbers, which was
yeah,
the opposite of the purpose of the glasses.
right, right. So what's going on in THORChain land, my friend?
Dude, just a lot of volume. I haven't been like seeing too much. Like I haven't been like on the dashboards every day like I normally am, just checking out everything. But I mean, last thing that happened, I put out the uh 2023 report. I don't know
Yep,
if you went through that up on the Twitter
yep,
here. It's the pin post.
yep.
If you haven't checked it out, and just running through the year at large, and obviously like big year, and just wanted to like highlight some of the biggest things that have been going on this year, and just point out some of the trends in a nice clean report that people could distribute and share with their friends and things.
Yeah, absolutely. No, that was a good report. Like well put together. Well done.
Yeah, so like if you guys haven't checked that out, I'm sure if you're in here, you probably saw it, at least scrolled past it or something. But you can always share it with people. Like it's in PDF form. If if you want the PDF, I'll send it to you, and you can distribute it to your friends and people who are kind of on the outside and want to see what's going on at THORChain land, which is basically just volume, users, and integrations, like the three main things. So
Yep. It's funny. I've been kind of giggling a little bit at the THORChain Twitter account lately because people making some posts around like a USDC ETH trade and getting like like a 4 bips trade execution, which is even better than you can get on you know Uniswap or 1inch.
yeah, I saw that too. That was I mean, there's some slick swaps that go through. Was that a Thor swap? So that's after affiliate fees even. I would
Yeah.
think, unless although I have seen some swaps in the monitors on Shapeshift. They've been doing a
Yep.
lot of volume with low to no affiliate fee with their new uh model.
Right. Right. It is kind of funny, like it's kind of crazy to think that a DEX that is global versus a DEX that is local, like Uniswap's looking more like a local DEX. It's still outperforming a local DEX, even though it's a global DEX. It's kind of that kind of breaks my brain a little bit. It's kind of crazy to think.
Yeah, I mean they can't stream it. Like that's the option. That's the only like they don't have the like we can exist intra block, so like we can stream
Right.
it on our own time, and
There's lots of things that we can do that they can't,
yeah.
and structurally, there's a lot of things we can do they can't. And it's funny because like they are adding the idea of a streaming swap. They call it something different, but it's conceptually very similar to Uniswap V4. That's like coming out, next year or this year, I should say, I guess. Um, but the difference is because they don't have their own environment, they have to run on the EVM. And then there's lots of limitations that come with that. And so they have these kind of methodologies of trying to get around the limitations of Ethereum and around Solidity in order to accomplish a similar goal. And the way they do that is not really that great because for us as a protocol, because we own the layer one, we can execute logic, and execute business code like whenever the hell we want, and not to worry about gas and other things in the same sense that you do it on Ethereum. So whenever you do a streaming swap on Uniswap, how that actually works is the first trade of a block will look for things that it can stream, like the next sub trade of a swap, right?
Mm.
And it will charge the gas to do the sub trade on the first swap of that block, right? And the first swap of that block will typically almost always be an arbitrage bot due to MEV and all this kind of stuff. And so arbitrage bots are the ones that are paying for the gas for a streaming swap to be able to execute. And if arbitrage swaps are actually paying for the gas and not the swapper, well, then now you have something that's, you're having the wrong person pay for the one who's benefiting from it because the arb bot's not benefiting from the streaming swap. It's the swapper. It's the user, right? But now they have to pay a bunch of extra gas, which Ethereum can be quite expensive, as you can probably guess. And so you're going to get the situation where arbitrage will actually have to um, perform worse because they have to pay for the gas of other people's transactions. And so they're not going to be able to actually have the pool price match the market price because they have all these additional costs that are being thrown on top of their actual like arbitrage stuff they're trying to do. So you're going to naturally get a worse price in terms of like what that streaming swap can actually execute on, just because the arb spots are going to be paying for the gas for other users to do a streaming swap. So we'll see how it actually like how much that affects it, how large or how little. But it'll definitely be interesting to see it. But structurally, the way we've designed streaming swaps is so much better and much more efficient than what
Yeah.
Uniswap V4 will do.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting. And I feel like you would have to wait and see and when it comes out. Like, is there have they said anything about when they're pushing all this stuff? Like, I haven't. I don't think they really announced like, hey, this is when V4 is coming out. I think they just kind of gave a preview, and then it's some indefinite time in the future. But I feel like it'd be tough to, like the best thing we can do is just like see what happens whenever it finally
Right.
comes out, and but it'll probably be a net win for the swappers, though. Just in general, maybe it's not as like clean of an execution, or maybe it disincentivizes arbs a little bit, but it might make for a better swap experience on Uniswap. So as a
It
trader,
probably
right?
will.
So
Yeah, it probably will make a better experience, or at least a more price efficient experience, which is good. Because that just means that Uniswap and THORChain and other ones as well are just going to become more competitive with centralized exchanges, and not not its primary offer to be not be just decentralization and lack of KYC and that kind of stuff, but also offering a better price execution. And to be honest, price execution is probably the biggest thing that people are actually sensitive to. Like, people really don't care about privacy all that much. In the end, what they really care about the most is price execution, right? That's the whole reason why L2s exist, is just to be cheaper, right? And better price execution through paying less in gas
yep,
and that kind of stuff. So I think the natural thing to happen is that dexes are going to become much more competitive with sexes, which is obviously a really good thing. And dexes will just naturally grow their 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 the pie that they are relative to sexes in terms of like spot trading and such.
yeah. Well, I think that's definitely going to happen naturally, just because of there not being any kind of overhead that comes with running, uh, a decentralized exchange. Because obviously, like Coinbase, whoever you're talking about, they all have these fixed costs that are involved with running an exchange, employees and healthcare and things like that. Like you run a DEX is just it just operates, right? And anyone can
Yeah,
use it. So I think
it's
like no
is
matter what, we're kind of competitive and just gaining in that environment.
right. You're absolutely right. So sexes are for-profit businesses, and dexes are public goods, right? They exist in a very different landscape, right, than a sex. And it's kind of crazy to think about this thing, the idea that like THORChain as a project, has very little resources allocated to it, right? Like in terms of, we've always had a very small amount of devs and very small team. You're talking about under a dozen people in total at any given time in THORChain's history, which is very tiny when you compare it to like a Binance, which has got thousands of employees, like at least 500 employees, maybe 1,000 or two. Maybe they've got some, like maybe they've laid off some people in the bear market and such. But like you're talking about hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people, and this thing is doing the same thing, right? Offering the same service and doing it just as well, if not better, is pretty nutty to think about. I mean, just think about how efficient that is. It's incredibly good for the market economy.
Yeah, for sure. So anything in particular that you've been thinking about as of recent? Yes, we haven't talked in a while. So what's on your mind?
Yeah, I guess the thing that I've been thinking about most lately is like we just finished Q4, obviously, and the focus of Q4 was stabilization and kind of like tech debt and efficiency gains and this kind of stuff. And there's in Q1 we'll have more efficiency gains, right? They're like we're not just done with that stuff, obviously. So it's a ongoing task. And so for Q1, I'm really mostly thinking about one thing that I'm thinking about is what's called trade accounts. We were talking about last year, at the end of last year. And another thing I'm thinking about is just improving the efficiency of the chain itself. And we got a bunch of those things landing in the near future around like Swapper Cloud. And we already landed, I think, the improvements to the conf counting. That's already been, I think I landed in 125, I think. And in 125, there was also Swapper Conf. It hasn't been enabled yet by the nodes quite yet, but that'll probably happen in the next couple of weeks to improve the efficiency of the network. And then trade accounts is about, to me, it's about doubling the capital efficiency of the arbitrage bots, so that with half the amount of capital, you can be just as efficient as keeping the pool price to match the market price. And the more capital efficient and better quality ARB bots that we can have in this network, that better price execution will have just naturally. Like, well, whenever you see a streaming swap not execute at 5 basis points, it's something larger than 5 basis points. That is almost always is due to inefficiency of ARBs, right? ARBs just not either not being able to keep up, or not having enough capital on hand, or like, whatever it might be. And so anything we can do to improve the capital efficiency of ARBs will just naturally create a much more capital efficient, a better price execution on THORChain itself.
Yeah, I don't think we ever talked about trade accounts on here because I think that you kind of introduced that a little bit after we did our last
Right.
space. So, like, yeah, I think we should definitely talk about trade accounts a little bit. And oh yeah, at first I think that there's still some stability stuff that needs to be fixed around AVAX and things that are going to have to be fixed in the
Yep.
first like week or two of the new year
Yep.
once everyone gets back to it and nodes
Yeah.
can start updating and yep.
Inscriptions were just like, such a pain in the ass over the last, month or so. It's wreaking havoc on various EVM chains in a sense.
Yeah, so what's the fix there? Is it just improving the method at which THORChain uses to scan the chain and to see what's happening on it so it doesn't lag as much? Like I'm not exactly sure
Yeah,
what the fix is.
but that's more or less basically it. Like, these inscriptions cause mostly AVAX, a little bit of BSC, maybe a couple more, but like it caused instability on those chains, right? It's utilizing the chains in a way that they're not really designed to be used, and in doing so, you're kind of harming the mempool, and you're causing huge amounts of transactions with little gas fees paid, which kind of creates like an instability in those chains, in the sense that, like, when you want to broadcast a transaction, it doesn't really get on chain as quickly as it normally does in normal circumstances, right? And so it creates this instability, or this kind of unreliability on those chains, and that unreliability kind of like causes problems for us in a sense. And so a lot of the changes we've been making around this has been, like small changes to Bifrost to be less sensitive towards a chain in itself, an external chain like AVAX, you know, um, to not cause problems for us when it's being unhealthy, when it is not operating in a smooth and in the way that it's supposed to be operated, right? And so it's just making kind of like pushing our code to an edge where the external chain is not like doing its job in a sense, and us, finding the cracks in our code where we can make some improvements to be more defensive in those scenarios.
Cool. Yeah, so it's mostly the mempool then actually. Like there's so many unconfirmed transactions in the mempool that it's just like the nodes are just lagging trying to get through all of those transactions and because
Yeah,
there's
I
just
think
so many.
that at a high level, that's kind of what it is.
Yeah.
It's a bit more complex than that, but that's generally the thing. And so we would broadcast a transaction, on AVAX, and it wouldn't get on chain for hours and hours and hours, and even days in some cases, right? And that just creates, you know, bad UX from our side, right? We want people to do swap from Bitcoin to AVAX. We want that swap to be executed in a reasonable amount of time, not like 4 days. Like that's obviously not good, right? So making some changes to be better about this stuff, and handle it when it does take days for a transaction to get on chain.
Cool, cool. So, yeah, you want to talk about trade accounts a little bit? Because, yeah, this is something that was introduced pretty recently. And, yeah, I don't fully have my head around it yet. So, if you want to explain kind of, what the new framework is around trade accounts and kind of like why moving past synths to this trade accounts idea.
Yeah. Well, so since a little like primer first, so people know the context. Since itself has primarily two roles in the protocol. The first role that since are used as an arbitrage tool, so that arbs can arb the pools without going through layer one transactions. Because if you have to, like, if you want to balance the Bitcoin pool, and you have to send some, layer one Bitcoin to the network, and you have to wait 10 minutes for that Bitcoin to be, on put into a block or whatever, and then observed and all these things. Like it's very slow, right? Because it's a layer one transaction, and it's much more efficient if you can just do it on within THORChain's own system, like internally within the THORChain network, and just arbitrage that way because blocks are fast, they're 5 seconds and not 10 minutes, and that kind of thing. And so you can arb things much more efficiently, right, using synthetics. You can always, you can still arb at layer ones if you really want to, of course, but since it's much more efficient, and that's how we generally see arbs today, we'll arb things, and arbs play an even more important role in the protocol today than they've ever have, because it's the arbs who make the capital efficiency of streaming swaps, a thing. Is arbs are there to arb intra swap, to give them that really great price execution of users and swappers on the network. So we want them to be around, and we want them to be, really efficient. We want them to do their jobs. And the problem with using synths for arbitrage is that they're not the most capital efficient way of doing so, because when somebody trades, let's say $1,000 worth of Rune into Bitcoin, right? And so they've added $1,000 of Rune, and they've taken out $1,000 worth of Bitcoin, minus fees, of course. It takes $2,000 worth of synthetic Bitcoin to correct the price. And there's a reason for that, and I probably shouldn't get into the details of it because it's a little bit complicated to explain just by an audio mechanism. I would need like a whiteboard to kind of really kind of help people to understand why that is. So just for the time being, just kind of take that as truth, and that as a synth holder, you need $2,000 worth of capital to arb a $1,000 trade. And that's the kind of the inefficiency of using synths for arbs for that purpose. And so a trade account, and the way that works is different, right? A synth is an asset that is backed by the liquidity of the pool. A trade account is an asset that you can acquire one of those things by inputting, a layer one asset or swapping to it. Doesn't really matter which per se. And then that is not even technically an asset. It's not even actually a coin. Even it's not even actually a token. It's not even you don't even hold a trade asset in your wallet. It's actually held in a module instead for security purposes. But you can trade instead of liquidating a synthetic and then removing a Rune from one side of the aisle. You can actually add Bitcoin to the Bitcoin side and take out Rune on the other side. And because you can do it, you're changing both sides. You're changing both sides of the pool. You're adding to the Bitcoin and taking out the Rune. You are much more capital efficient, whereas a synthetic will just remove Rune from the pool and not add or remove from the Bitcoin side of the pool. It just kind of removes from the Rune side of the pool when you liquidate a synthetic. So by using trade accounts, it allows arbs to be able to use less capital to correct the price, use half the amount of capital to correct the price the same amount as it would yesterday with using the synthetics. So I'm excited just to kind of move away from synthetics as an arbitrage tool, and move towards trade accounts because it's much more capital efficient. And then synthetics is purely just used for savers, right? For the earn product of the network, which means there's just more space in savers for savers, right? There's more, we don't need to have savers and arbs kind of competing with each other of the same kind of like liquidity that they're trying to utilize to accomplish whatever goal they're trying to accomplish. They're now separate assets, and they have separate mechanisms of capping the amount of liquidity that is allowed. And so you have just less competition for earners, and which means that more earners can participate in the network, which is generally a good thing, right? And arbs are now just using these trade accounts theoretically, and they're still doing what they're doing. They're still making a bunch of money, and they're just much more capital efficient about it. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I mean, so some of the basic stuff there is like number one, that they're not actually coins that you hold in your own wallet. They're coins that are held by a module. So your address essentially is, I wonder like what's the actual difference? What's the mechanical difference between having owning the coin? Say that all the synths were just in a module and you just had that was your balance of those synths, but they're in the module rather than your wallet. Is there an actual like difference that there's something different materially about
Yeah.
that, or is it just okay? Yeah, what is it then?
Right. So here's the material difference. So like, if THORChain was to do a wrapped asset, like a wrapped Bitcoin on THORChain, right? what that would look like is you would deposit Bitcoin, we would mint, a wrapped Bitcoin on THORChain, and we would put it in your wallet, right? Whatever wallet, your THORChain wallet, and you're just holding it or trading with it or whatever the hell you want to do with it, right? And then that's what a wrapped asset would look like, right? This is conceptually very similar, but there's a strong difference. And the strong difference is that by putting in Bitcoin, minting this asset and putting it into a module rather than your wallet, the network has the ease of an ability to be able to burn or liquidate that asset when it needs to, right? So in a wrap scenario, if Rune's price were to dive, the wrap asset would stay untouched, right? It wouldn't be touched. It wouldn't be liquidated. It would just stay there forever. And then you create economic insecurity, blah blah blah, and a whole series of problems that I would like to personally avoid. But in a situation like this one, all the kind of asset that's held in a module, you're not actually owning any of the assets in that module. It's more of like you have it's a pool of those assets, and you have a percentage of those assets. So in the event that Rune's price dives drastically, and we're bumping up against economic security, and the value of the assets we're securing is now exceeding the value of the bond, can liquidate the Bitcoin in that module into Rune and give it to the bond guys to reduce the liability and increase the security, right? And that's the big difference. That's why you will need to do it in a module, so you can easily liquidate that capital when you need to ensure that you maintain economic security. In reality, though, that would probably never really happen because our bots are bots. They're online all the time. They're running infrastructure all the time. They're always looking at the price of Rune, always looking at the price of Bitcoin. That's literally what an R bot does. And so in the event that Rune's price is diving and we're getting kind of that point where we would start to liquidate the Bitcoin, an R bot wouldn't just let their Bitcoin get liquidated, because that would just be losing money for no reason, right? So what they would do is they would just liquidate it themselves at a 1-to-1 value rather than liquidate it at a 1 to 0.9 value. And so before the network would even liquidate any of that Bitcoin and that trade Bitcoin asset, the arbitrage bot would just like exit, right? And so that you rarely even ever get to that place, because our bots will just protect themselves before you even got to that line, right? But a user who's a saver, who's not paying attention, they're not running infrastructure, they don't have a bot that's maintaining or looking at the Bitcoin price or the Rune price all the time, they may not be keeping their eye on things. They could get to a point where things can get liquidated or whatever, and other hypothetical. But in this case, liquidation would probably never actually really occur, because they would just exit before you even got to that line.
Interesting. Yeah, so a couple questions just to, get a better picture in my head. So when you go and deposit Bitcoin into a trade asset, like what happens to that Bitcoin? It's not in the pools, right? It's in like where does the Bitcoin actually go when you deposit it? Like where's the accounting kind of come from there?
Yeah, so the network actually has like two different things that it tracks the Bitcoin in the network, right? One is the pool, which is how much Bitcoin is in the pool. And two is the vault, like how much Bitcoin is in an Asgard vault. And there's at a given time there's 5 or 6 of those. And generally speaking, if everything is like optimal, everything's like tip top, then all the Bitcoin in the vaults is equal to all the Bitcoin that's being tracked in the pool, right? So when you deposit a layer 1 BTC, you're increasing the number of Bitcoin in the vault, and then you are creating a Bitcoin asset in the trade module, and then you are being allocated units, kind of like LP units, similar to an LP unit, but instead of being an LP, you have a trade unit, right? A trade thing, right? That you are owning a percentage of that module at that particular moment. So the Bitcoin is held outside of the pool and outside of that trading system, right, of the pool itself. It's held in the network outside of that system, and then it liquidates in order to ensure economic security. You never get into a bad place. It has that liquidation methodology that it will liquidate some amount of that Bitcoin, and basically what that liquidation really means is just moving it. It's just an accounting change. You're moving it from the module and you're putting it into the pool, and you're getting out Rune, and you're depositing that Rune into the bond module.
Got it. Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. So yeah, all of the addresses that THORChain controls, that is just that's all the Bitcoin that the network has. And
Correct.
then a subset of that is the amount that's in the pool. So that's paired with Rune. So Bitcoin and Rune is, maybe 80% of that entire balance, and the rest of that is allocated towards the trade assets. And
Yeah.
they have an IOU asset for what's outside of the pools, but if it gets to an unsafe scenario, then those then that Bitcoin can go to the pool if necessary.
Right. And by putting it in the pool, now there's an arbitrage opportunity to correct the pool price, which means that Bitcoin will basically exit the system, meaning that you also reduce the liability, you reduce the exonerous assets in the network, and the security is more or less the same from a second ago. And so you're making things more secure by doing so.
Got it. So that would still count against the incentive pendulum. There's just more assets that it's securing, but with the same amount of rune that is
Yeah,
with less rune than it would be paired with it before.
right. The pendulum today is based upon the amount of rune in the pool versus the amount of rune in the bond module. But this would trigger a change. It would be, instead of the amount of assets in the pool, it would be the amount of assets in the vaults. And right now, the number of assets in the vaults, the number of assets in the pool are more or less the same. They're not technically like down to the Satoshi the same, because there's like moving assets and trades and swaps that are kind of like, it's in flight, it's a constantly adjusting number, but like they're generally about the same amount in both. So they are more or less the same. But because you're now having a methodology to deposit Bitcoin to the network that's not also being deposited into the pool, you need to change the pendulum to swing based upon the exonerous assets, the value of the exonerous assets versus the value of the pool, the bond itself.
Got it. Yeah, it's an interesting shift. So, and do you think that so the ARBs would most likely shift to this because it's twice as capital efficient, meaning they would have to spend they'd have to put half as much into into a trade and get the same amount of value essentially.
Yeah, to be honest, I'm not even quite sure like how it affects the ARB income, whether it makes it less or more. I have to think more about it. My initial thinking is that it actually will be less money. Like ARBs will probably lose money in this context, which means that the LPs and the savers retain more in the pool. But in the end, their job is primarily is to arm the pools. So if we can kind of get them to do that as efficiently as possible, that's obviously in the best interest of protocol.
Yeah. Well, if it's not more profitable, then how would you get them to switch off of using synthetics today?
Oh well, that way we would just turn off synthetics, right? Like in
Like
within
turn
the
off trading
context.
synthetics, right?
Yeah, you basically would, unless you're depositing or withdrawing into savers, it would just you could burn a synthetic, but you wouldn't be able to mint a synthetic, right? And so we would just force it, to be honest with you.
Oh, yeah, I guess yeah, that would make sense. Do you think that trade assets would make sense from the perspective? Okay, so look at from the lens of like a pro trader type person that wants to make trades on chain. Maybe someone that's using like perp dexes today. Do you think trade assets kind of also work for that type of user? Like, is it also better to actually make swaps and things with trade assets? And is it something like an advanced user could do, or is it something that you would think only
Yeah,
like a very sophisticated ARB bot?
I think initially it's targeted for our bots, yes, but um, if we decided to go down the order book road, right, or the limit order road, this would probably be the asset that they would use. So they would deposit layer one Bitcoin into the network. They would get this kind of like trade asset, which is basically kind of like an IOU, and then you would trade back and forth. And whenever you're ready, you can liquidate your trade asset, your IOU, back into layer one Bitcoin. And if that sounds very similar to what you do on Binance or Coinbase, yeah, it's basically conceptually the same thing, right? Binance or Coinbase, you deposit some token, right? And you increases your accounting on their system. Now you got like one Bitcoin of an IOU on Coinbase or whatever, and then you trade back and forth, one direction, the other direction. You set up limit orders, or you do, margin accounting, margin accounts, or whatever the fuck it is you want to do with it. And then whenever you're ready to exit, you just, do a withdrawal, and you burn the IOU, and then you get the layer one Bitcoin back in your BC1 address. Um, you know, Whenever that happens, right? So it's conceptually like is recreating that same experience that you have on Binance or Coinbase. It's very, familiar for people. And so when you get to the place where you do have professional trading tools on THORChain, like limit orders, like perpetuals, like margin accounts potentially, like whatever that might be, all the pro tools that traders use in crypto today, and you recreate those same things on THORChain. Now you have like almost complete parity in some sense to what a Coinbase or a Binance is capable of doing, and you can do that in a completely decentralized and much more efficient and cheaper way of doing it than what they can possibly offer you.
Yeah, I mean that's one of those killer use cases that I always think of as it's something that I wish there was some interface that was doing this. I guess it's tough because we don't really only have like spot exposure, and I guess a lot of those types of people, they like to do leverage and things like that, and
Right.
just more coins and things. But like just having interfaces take advantage of synthetics and do like this pro trader type interface where you can
Yeah.
just make your swaps out. That's something I'm looking forward to. Eventually when someone actually picks that up and makes something that's like a really competitive product there. So I mean, as long as trade accounts work with something like that, then it sounds like a good move.
Yeah, that's like I don't think people realize that like most of the volume in crypto is not in swaps. Like it's not. It's mostly like it's the whales that really push the volume, and whales aren't doing little swap interfaces on Coinbase Basic UI. They're going to Coinbase Pro or Binance Pro, right, and using professional tools because they are high net worth individuals with complex trading strategies and whatnot, and so. I would love to see THORChain move, not a move away from, but just kind of include a larger, you know, market of the type of person that would use THORChain. It's great to be used for people who just want to trade Bitcoin to ETH for a little simple trade one time, blah blah blah, whatever, and get a decent price execution. That's great, but a lot of the capital is really in like those pro tiers and those pro interfaces, and we just don't have the tools for those people today. We just, like as you said, like streaming swaps is not really. I mean, it's great, but it's not a pro tool in the traditional sense of how people think with these things. What we need is limit orders. What we need is perpetuals. What we need is leverage. All those things. You support those things on layer one assets like Bitcoin and whatnot. Like now you're really fucking talking. That's where the majority of the volume being traded through Coinbase and Binance is coming through that shit. It's not the simpleton UI. It's the pro interface, the pro tools that people are really using. So I would love to see us expand, our user base away from not just the swappers to traders. And from there, I think we'll just get a lot more volume in the network.
Yeah, I mean, not to stray off of that, but you mentioned margin, which is something I kind of thought of. I was just thinking about like, man, like you could kind of do something with margin on Thorchain just because like you could essentially make trades against like an LP or something as your margin or as your savers account as your margin. Is that
Mm-hmm.
kind of what you're thinking of? Because I was like, man, that's such a cool idea because who wouldn't want exposure to something like that? Like having your regular savers position, but then it's like, oh yeah, well you can if you want you can make some trades using that as margin if you want without having to withdraw it or
Right.
mess with it.
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, I haven't really thought deeply about margins. I know it's something we could do in theory if it's something that we were interested as a community in going in that route or direction. There's been more time and focus on perpetuals and how that would be designed and implemented than there has been on margins. But in general, like if you just think about all the major tools, all the major financial instruments that uh, a major sex like Binance or Coinbase offers, like we can do all of that shit, if we really wanted to. I don't think there's much we couldn't do, to be honest. The one thing we probably couldn't do very well is like asset management, which is probably a big component of Coinbase business and Binance business is around asset management. But that's one thing we probably couldn't do very well. But everything else probably could do it just as good, if not better.
Yeah, definitely interesting problem. Yeah, asset
Yeah.
management. I've kind of like I feel like there's something interesting there, but I'm not really sure what it is. Like this is kind of a crazy. This is kind of crazy, but have you ever thought about kind of TSS key share inception, where you
Hmm.
have a TSS, so you have THORChain do like a key sign, and then that what they're signing is a TSS share uh for another vault essentially, where it could be like a one of three signer or something like that.
In order to do asset management.
Yeah, something like asset management.
Yeah. I don't know how to do that and maintain economic security. I think that's whenever I think about asset management. Well, maybe the one way you could do it is actually through. We talked about this a long time ago, and it's been kind of put on in cold storage. But we talked about cold vaults, and cold vaults might be
Oh yeah.
a methodology, but that doesn't. But to be honest, that doesn't scale particularly well. Like in asset management, it's going to be a mega huge business in the coming like couple of years. Like almost all of these spot ETFs that we're talking, be hearing about from ARK Investments and Genesis and whatever else, but like Gemini rather, almost all of them, a lot of them are going to be using Coinbase um, as
Yep.
their asset management thing. That's going to be storing all that because Charles Schwab is not going to be storing Bitcoin, and same thing with Fidelity and the rest of these guys. They don't want to take on that risk, right? And Coinbase is really has a long history. They've got they do a good job. It's a really well run exchange in the U.S. And so asset management is probably going to become their business, their biggest business because they're going to be losing the spot war over the next few years. Like they're going to get their asses handed to them through like THORChain is going to destroy Coinbase in terms of their spot trading, into the future, and maybe even some of a lot of the professional tools potentially. Maybe not in the institution side of things because they have to like operate differently through regulations, blah blah blah. So they have to avoid things like THORChain in that particular case. But like a lot of the volume that they're gonna lose a lot of it to dexes like THORChain and other ones and chain flip and whatnot. But one thing that we can't compete very well on is asset management. And a lot of the spot ETF stuff that we're seeing in the Bitcoin world, like they're never going to use a decentralized system to do the um, asset management of that Bitcoin. Like that would be
Yeah.
ridiculous in their case because they're obviously already centralized. They need liability. They need somebody to call and talk to. They need assurances and blah blah
Yeah, they need a
blah.
contract that says if you lose our Bitcoin, like
Right. They need
you need to get it back,
Right. And so
essentially. Yeah.
it's not something that I'm interested in competing with them on that regard on Coinbase. I just don't think we can be competitive, to be honest with you. And that's okay. We don't need to own the world. We can just own crypto in general. I'll be, I'll be fine with just the crypto part of it. If they want to just like, offer services to centralized entities like Charles Schwab and whatnot, then, have at it. That's your world. Dealing with centralized entities and KYC and all right, have fun. You got it. But when it comes to actual like trading and like everything else, I'd like to see us fucking kick everybody else's ass in that regard.
Yeah, for sure, man. If people want to come up, by the way, anyone can request to come up if you want to, wish us Happy New Year or just come say something. It's open for people to come up. I'll let you up. But
Yep,
yeah, the other thing that I was kind of thinking of and seeing a good bit about is just Chainflip's launch, which is going on. Uh, yeah, man,
yeah,
they're coming off the gate, and it looks like they kind of have like a swap beta that's up, and
yep,
they're gonna have their mainnet, I guess, fully functional sometime this month, hopefully, as in like January,
yep,
probably.
yep. Probably, yeah. It's looking good. Like I'm excited to see it. To see it kind of like I finally roll. Like, I mean, you can trade right now, but it's like I think it's like a maximum of $1,000. Like they have a cap on it just for I guess for security purposes or whatever. While they're kind of like verifying that everything kind of moves in the right direction. But yeah, probably within the course of the next month, they'll be like fully live. And I'm really curious to see how the do like a comparative trades, right, of various sizes like Bitcoin to ETH on THORChain versus Chainflip to see what the actual like what is the time execution, right, and what is the price execution and like all that kind of stuff. And I'm quite confident we can beat them, hands down almost every trade.
Yeah, 'cause it seems like most of what they're saying in their, kind of marketing speak is like, hey, we have the best product out there. So it's like, I mean, time will tell what's going to happen, and what kind of security choices they make around like things like confirmation counting, which I think they probably, I believe they do less of, but I'm not particularly sure. I've seen them make like some statements which I don't think are 100% true. So like, obviously I would take anything with a grain of salt and do your own testing and stuff too when it's actually out.
Yeah.
Even things
Well,
like gas estimation, that's one thing that I saw because we have seen that a lot in the past couple of weeks where people will be like, the gas is like crazy expensive, but Thornode gives like pretty very conservative gas estimate, and then it refunds the rest to the user. So it shows sometimes a bad quote where it's like, oh, you're going to be paying this much in fees, and that's like the worst case estimate. And
yeah.
anything else gets refunded. It could possibly be that amount, but more than likely, like you're paying probably a third of that.
Yeah.
Right. So, yeah. So it's just like things around like just small UX things like quoting and oh yeah, how they're going to roll out memoless. Um, it's
Yep.
going to be that'll be good because I would really like to see that get pushed off the ground here for THORChain because I think that'll be one of the most powerful tools to actually get the product to like outside of just the core interfaces and kind of like spread swaps to more
Yep.
wallets. And I mean, I think it'll improve the UX in every single dimension. So like them having a product out probably before THORChain does. I think that'll be good to get us off the ground in that respect and just make the UX better.
Yeah. Once they fully launch and they're fully operational, and we can kind of check out their volumes, and we can they can be like a kind of a groundhog in some sense of telling us, how useful, how valuable is the idea of a memorless transaction, because they support that off the bat, and we don't today, but we have the code down. You could add it fairly quickly. But if we did add it, like how much would that really affect our volume? Would it be a small percentage, or would it be a huge percentage? Like it's hard to know. But they will probably validate that market to tell us how valuable is a memorless transaction really, and we can kind of use them as guinea pigs in a matter of speaking to help us make informed choices.
Yeah. Uh, my own thought, real quick, before I let everyone else that I let up speak, is that I don't really think it's going to have a crazy effect on volumes, where it's like, oh, 95% of our volume is all of a sudden memoless. It just opens it up to more and more users who may or may not be doing large amounts of volume, but it just makes it so like so for example, like a single chain wallet, let's say like a Dogecoin wallet that only does Doge, right? They want to onboard people from other ecosystems, like they want to grow their own user base. But the only way they could do that is with some kind of swap service that, does from one chain to the other, and that's like the crypto native onboarding. But they're never going to
Mm-hmm.
go through something and do like a wallet connect. Like essentially, what I'm trying to say
Right.
is that this thing enables us to do like single chain integrations much more easily, and just have more and more users using it. Whether that translates to volume per day, I really doubt a lot of services do like more than 10 million in volume in a day, just based on like how big these services actually are, and how many users they service. Some
Yeah.
do, like big wallets, obviously, like they do crazy amounts of volume, but then you look at the average service and they probably don't do as much. Like they probably do somewhere in that range of volume, like maybe like 10 million at the most, right? Which
Yeah.
is not even that much compared to what THORChain does today. But
Well, I would
yeah.
argue that the reason why the bullish case for minimalist transactions in my mind is that um, you're well aware of this because you've been like feet on the ground in this thing. But like whenever we want to integrate a wallet, right, or convince some wallet like Exodus, for example, and we have to spend so much time trying to sell them and trying to convince them why a Bitcoin ETH trading pair on Exodus is good, and then they have to go through the process of evaluating the technology of it and how much integration is going to require, how much testing, how much development, blah blah blah, and like all these things. And that just is a very long process. But if you make it so that you can integrate a wallet can integrate with THORChain without doing like a lot of dev work, because minimalist transactions would allow that to happen very, very quickly and very easily. It's a very much lighter lift for the devs of any particular wallet to integrate with THORChain at that point. because you're reducing the resistance or the friction to like supporting THORChain, the number of wallets that support THORChain do trades should naturally increase, relative to the amount of friction that you're reducing, right? And so my thought is that once we have memless transactions, we're going to have specific UIs for that purpose. That like THORChain Bull's been talking about doing that for a while, but I also think that we're going to have a low hanging fruit, easy methodology for various wallets and UIs to integrate with THORChain without really like building up return support and blah 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 and all this kind of complex shit. And they can just like hit an API point and then broadcast the transaction, and that's literally all there is to it. And I think that'll just naturally cause more UXs, more UIs to interface, just because it's so cheap and easy. You could do it overnight, if you wanted to.
Yep. Crypto Talia, what's up?
Yeah, hi, hello, everybody. Thank you for bringing me up. And yeah, sorry, I will to just point about what the chat was saying about arbitraging both. I think since streaming swaps, arbitraging both has become even more an integrating part of the protocol and very important uh, things on the THORChain ecosystems. So I would like to renew a point that I make like maybe 2 years ago, or one, or maybe two, I can't remember, during the beer market. Anyway, that was that I think the core team should code and socialize arbitrage bots because are so important as you keep stressing. Even you avoid always my request because I thought even before streaming swap that it was important that it's not just a thing that we leave to people outside to do it. And also there are speculation, but I want to keep it out.
Yeah, I think your comment, if I understood you correctly, was that you think that the devs of THORChain should work on, building our bots and arbing the network itself, rather than relying on just, third-party
Uh,
individuals.
it's a bit more, sorry to interrupt you, but it's a bit more complex. A bit different. I think that the protocol itself should code arbitraging bot and then open it to the community in the way like if you want to put rune or USD. I didn't go really into the working of arbitrage bot, but I think you need to put some capital in. So I think rune or and even any other coin in both side or any pool, and then let it works in the way uh, people from the community can provide liquidity to the bot itself and then get the gain and also have that important instrument like you always try to stress lately, um, to be socialized. So in the way like we can optimize streaming swap and also the community can be part of an important um, part of the protocol, an essential part of the protocol and essential to streaming swap to work, plus having a return that is socialized. I mean, it's go back to the community and it's not to go to some random people or shoddy figure.
Yeah, so there are some complexities around this. For example, if you are arbing the pools, technically you are making taxable events whenever you arb the pool. So the question then becomes, well, then who is actually arbing the pool and who's paying the taxes to do so? So if it was me personally, for example, if I built an arbot and I, made it so that anybody could deposit their Bitcoin or their assets into my arbot and share the revenue that's produced. That creates a lot of tax complexity for me as an individual. And for that reason, I think it's probably best that we don't have devs engage in that kind of thing. In general, I don't want the core protocol to be engaged in being as engaged into as little things as possible, and we just allow the market and the community to build UIs, art bots. Even like LP University is a really good example. Any of these things, and just keep our hands as clean as possible, and just let the market satisfy the needs of the industry. Now, if you want to build your own RBot and you want to make it open so people can deposit into your RBot to help fund it, you can do that, right, as an individual, right? And then people will have to trust you because they're giving you their Bitcoin, and you have to worry about the taxation, concerns around this, blah, 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 all that stuff. But I don't think it's really
You
appropriate
know,
for,
well, it's
for
not
me to
gonna.
do it.
You know, well, it's
Huh?
not gonna happen. So there is trust on the core team, but there are no trust, obviously, on me. And plus, there are jurisdiction arbitrage you can leverage. And plus, I was also suggesting beside and even before the arbitrage, the socialized arbitrage bot to build a DAO, which is out of USA jurisdiction, which is actually the only one which is making problem along with it. Eventually in Switzerland, which is quite natural and well known for not making problems, and also offering the rune um, THORChain community nodes. So you can build a DAO, for example. The dev team, I know, is based in the US and it's very risky for you, I think. So you're very brave, guys. But I think building a DAO with a legal, as a legal entity on Switzerland or the Bahamas, something like that, which run a community node where everybody can deposit his rune in a community run node. I know there is a technical problem and blah blah blah. We discuss about it, but I think it's easily to be overcome with some code. And then beside run also arbitraging bot.
Yeah, I mean, for me, I'm just not interested in building an arbitrage bot personally. I think I'm more focused on trade accounts and efficiency of the protocol and order books and just making sure the protocol itself is operating and not collapsing to zero. That's kind of where my time and focus is. And a lot of we're not a big dev team. We don't, like I said before, we're very small relative to the rest of the industry. We don't have a lot of resources, and to spin up resources to build something that the community is already capable of doing themselves is just not a good allocation of resources, in my opinion. And to be honest, if I was going to build an art bot, I wouldn't do it as a THORChain dev. I would just do it independently. I would just write the code. I'd probably open source it just to, so everybody wants to use what they can. And I'd fund it
I think
myself.
the best way, Chad, will be to open a DAO, to build a DAO for THORChain. So also you will lift security and direct issue with the law in the US. That's my suggestion.
Yeah, but you can't
That's
do this
also a
via.
person.
It's not practical to do this via a DAO, to be honest with you, because in the end, in order to our THORChain, you need to have an account on some centralized exchange, like a
Yeah,
Binance, for
that's true.
example.
Yeah, but
And
you can open
somebody has to
you
be
can
that, and
open
that.
you can open an entity in the Bahamas or in Switzerland, and also you taking all the risk legally, especially you that you are the one exposed because you put the face and the name and the surname.
Yeah,
I'm nothing versus you, but I feel you in a very weak position, and I think my suggestion eventually help you to get out of trouble before trouble comes.
yeah, yeah. I don't know. If in the end somebody needs to be a KYC entity, in this case it would be me, I guess, hypothetically, then there's no real reason for a DAO. Like a DAO would just be pointless. It would just be a way for people to vote and kind of voice their perspectives on what
unless you
what they.
create a trust or an economic entity like a company in some country which prosecute.
But then it's still the company that really owns everything and operates everything. So the DAO has no power.
Can be a trust.
But still, but then that trust is the thing that has the power, not the DAO. The DAO can only just voice what they like. I want to see this. I'm voting yes.
The DAO got a voting system, so the DAO,
but the voting system has no
trust.
Got
a trustee commit, so you are not alone. But there are like a few people, at least 5 or 10 in the trustee, and then. Sorry.
So whatever the DAO votes has no teeth, right? Because the DAO could vote yes on something, and then me say, you know what, I don't like it, and I'm just not going to do it, right? Like I have in the end, I'm really choosing what happens, and I can choose to follow the DAO or not.
The entity can be a trust, and the DAO can be decentralized, so the vote count. I mean, I'm voting.
My point is that the votes would not count. Votes would be 100% meaningless because it has no insurances that no matter how things are voted, legally with who?
With the code? With the code, you can. Everybody
the code that I run and I operate, I can change that code arbitrarily. In this case, I'm running the RBot. It's my code. I can do the fuck I want.
Aave can change is a DAO and can change the code arbitrarily, or Cosmos can. I don't think so. I mean,
but that's different though. You're talking about a smart contract, and the smart contract is actually operating the thing itself, right?
That's
a different system.
That's what I'm talking about.
But then, in this case, there is no smart contract that actually owns or runs anything. It's me as an individual running it, and I have the ability to do whatever the fuck I want. It doesn't matter how the DAO's voting in any particular direction. I can just fucking do it the hell I want, including not give you back your Bitcoin if you ask for it back, right? So the DAO is just going to be a for show way for people to explain, to kind of voice what they like to see happen. But in the end, it's my fucking choice. I'm owning this thing. I own the code. I own the servers. I own all these things, and there's no legal thing that you can do as a DAO, because a DAO does not have like legal rights in this context to be able to sue me for any kind of activity that I do, because you opted into the system and it's operating the way I told you it was going to operate, which means I get to do the fuck I want.
But the trustee can usually got like 5, 10 or even more people into the trustee, so it's more difficult to cheat. It's like the node.
Even if there's trustees, I'm still the one running the infrastructure. I'm the one that's running the server that runs all these, that has the private keys, that's doing all this trading to do the ARBs. Trustees are just sitting on a fucking, couch somewhere in a boardroom and just kind of like talking to each other. In the end, I'm the one that actually runs everything. I'm the one that actually owns everything. I'm the one that operates everything. And trustees have no fucking power over me either, right? Like they can't do anything about it. They can say, "Hey, Chad."
They own the exchange account. So where the one you're using, like Binance or whatever else you're using, they own it, the trustee. So they are responsible for it. I mean, it's not black and white. I mean, probably I'm wrong in a certain at a certain point, but I don't think it's like you are saying 100%.
I'm just saying that you either have
there is some way on the middle, but you don't want to come in my way, and so I'm not coming your, because I don't think it's fully like you are telling. Sorry about my.
I'm just generally saying that either a system is decentralized or it's not. It's either centralized or decentralized. I mean, and there are gradients between those two things for sure. But if you're going to run something, right,
even
it is only as decentralized as
Ethereum is beyond trustee in the end, because the Ethereum Foundation is a trust. So the same, if they collude and they want to sell all the...
Can we give the opportunity to somebody else, please?
Yeah, sure. Sorry.
Yeah, go for it, Knight.
Sorry, I love the Italians, but my God, you take a lot of time to make a point. Thank you, though. Anyway, I'll make mine very quick. Question 1 is, why isn't Matic as a native integrated? I tried today to move a wrapped chain link from Matic into Rune, and I had to go through a third party, and this is using Trust Wallet. So you can't go directly from Polygon into THORChain, when I think it kind of is, it's the base of Ethereum, so it should be as quick as integrating that. And the second one is, we need to find a solution to using Rune on its own. So not everybody wants to put in an LP. If anybody put in an LP when Rune was at 75 cent, they would have definitely lost money versus hodling, because no matter what token you put it against in an LP, Rune went up way higher than any other token, unless you were lucky enough to put it against potentially AVAX. But any other token, BTC, Ethereum, you had way more multiplier of Rune on its own by hodling than having it in an LP. And therefore, that going back to this module of community nodes, where, you know, if I go into a Kepler wallet right now, I can choose which validator to add my token in and be part of that security and earn a bit of percentage of what they're earning. But that doesn't seem to exist for just holding Rune on its own. That's my questions. Thank you very much.
The first one question was about Matic, and so in general, adding new chains in over the last year or so has not really been viable, just because we only have so much security, and for a long time, when the market was much more bear than it is now, we had no space in security. So adding new chains was a little bit pointless in some sense, because we didn't have the space for it. Today we have the space for it, and we can add new chains. I think maybe Kyle actually knows more about this. We've had conversations with Matic in the past, and there's been some bullishness on their side to getting Matic added, but adding new chains itself is not something that's easy to do, even when it's a fork of Ethereum or whatever. There's still complexities, there's still risks, there's still maintenance costs, there's still operational costs that we devs have to do, and AVAX is kind of a recent example of like a very costly chain, because we have to constantly deal with this fucking horseshit that we've been seeing the last few weeks from AVAX, and that's just been very draining of our resources, draining of our time, and we can't focus on other things. So I'm for adding Matic personally, adding Polygon personally. I think it's a good addition to be made in general, but it's really just up to the devs and what they have time and resources to do, and what the community wants to see added. Your second question around having another option for Rune holders to earn a yield. We don't do the whole fucking just throwing Rune into a validator and staking it and making money, blah blah blah. And we don't do that for a good reason, and that is because that whole idea, while is common in the Cosmos world, is complete and utter horseshit. It makes no fucking sense. You are not providing a value to anybody else in the world. Nobody's willing to pay you or pay fees to you for staking your tokens onto a network like that. It is completely moronic that this industry believes that I can just stake tokens and just earn money, and that stake tokens is not actually used for anything valuable. You're not participating in committing blocks to the chain. You're not running infrastructure. You're not providing liquidity for swaps or something like this to happen. It's completely stupid. And everybody just wants free money, and in the end, it's not actually free money, because where that money comes from, because nobody's willing to pay you for it. There's no external capital coming into your protocol to pay people for do this. That's not how it works at all. How does it work? People just mint to an oblivion the token, and which basically means they're reallocating value. They're taking it away through an invisible tax to people that don't have that staked in the system, to people who do have it staked in the system. And most of the time, because it's a free and easy thing to do, and has almost near zero risk to it, everybody fucking does it. And now you have a chain where like 90% of the Atom tokens or whatever are staked, which means that nobody's making any money at all, because there's only 10% of the capital that you can reallocate into that 90%, which means nobody's making money. Everybody thinks they're making money because they don't understand how math works, but in reality, they think they're getting an 8% return or a 9% return. In reality, it's closer to 1.5 or 2%, because they're inflating the coin to fucking death. So that is not going to work for this protocol in general. I've always been staunchly against it for many reasons. If you're looking for a Rune-only way of earning, there is bond providing, right? In which case you're providing security in that methodology. That's always an option. But I don't know what else it would be, right? And people have been talking about providing Rune into the POL as a methodology doing that. People have been talking about earlier, Crypto Italian was talking about providing room to some arbitrage individual, maybe something like that. But to be honest, like that's not necessarily the role of Rune is to give you as many yield opportunities as possible. It's trying to provide services for the industry, right? The Rune is a token that's there to allow us to be able to provide services in the public good for the industry, not just to be like, infinite source of yield and whatnot. That's just like the crypto industry trying to get rich by doing nothing, right? Like that's kind of a pet peeve I have with the industry in general. Is everybody's here to make money and become millionaires without lifting a fucking finger, and being just lazy fucks and just wanting to just like ride something to the moon and becoming a millionaire without actually doing anything of value. And that's just kind of like how this industry works in the current moment, which is just rather frustrating for people who actually are here to like build and here to provide value, here to change the world in one form or another. You know what I mean?
But Chad, like I can understand how in terms of the inflation by adding more tokens and you're inflating the token number, and that's how people are making money. But if you even look at Bitcoin, until the last block, it is inflationary. No matter what people are trying to pretend it's not. Oh no, it's only 21 million. Yes, but those 21 millions haven't been minted. So next year's supply, there's much more tokens in the supply
Right, but that's
in
not
the
the
chain.
same thing. That's
No,
not
no,
the same thing at
yeah, yeah,
all.
but the US dollar was built on an inflation. That's why we want it only 2%. We don't want it 4%. It's been inflated over the past 100 years, so that your $1 that was 100 years ago is now worth 1 cent. So that is a monetary system that has worked until now because they've inflated and
Right,
they've
but
reached that one.
but the
So
difference is that in Bitcoin, it's inflating, and it's giving money to people who are providing value. And people, in this case, are mining. They're increasing the security of the network by increasing the hash rate of the network, and they're getting paid for their troubles. They're spending capital. They are burning electricity. They're buying electricity and burning it to an oblivion. They're buying infrastructure, and they're doing that. Now, the inflation within Bitcoin is there to kickstart it, to bootstrap it, right? Because if you didn't do inflation in Bitcoin, Bitcoin wouldn't exist, right? Nobody would mine it because you get like 10 cents every 10 minutes, and nobody would fucking mine it, and it wouldn't be able to do transactions, and nobody would buy it, nobody would entertain it, nobody would engage with it. And eventually one day there will be no more inflation, in Bitcoin in like 150 years, or how the number is. And that's okay in that sense, because it's using inflation to kickstart the network and get it bootstrapped, in one form or another. And it's identically the same in THORChain's case. We have inflation in the form of block rewards to bootstrap the network, to ensure that LPs make some fucking reasonable money in the early days, and they're not just like making 12 cents every fucking 12 days. And so that nobody would be an LP, and the whole thing just kind of doesn't work. And you have a little bit of a chicken and the egg situation, and you use inflation to get out of the chicken and the egg, right? You're using inflation at a particular time. But like, we don't do inflation forever, right? Our inflation is decreasing with every single block, right? That's how it should be. The long-term goal is that the inflation will go down to near zero, and the network would propagate purely upon providing a value for the world, which is trading Bitcoin to Ethereum, for example, or loans, or whatever other services we're going to be offering in the next 10 years, or whatever the hell it is. But to do a thing where you say, as a protocol, we are going to have a protocol like Atom, right? I'll pick on Gaia. We're going to have a protocol like Gaia. It doesn't actually fucking do anything. It provides no value and no service for anybody in this fucking planet. It's just a test chain, in a matter of speaking, where people can vote on things that don't actually matter, like whether or not the inflation is 5% a year or 2.5% a year, where the hell that fucking 843 was recently. The chain does absolutely fucking nothing. It provides no value, and it has no income, right? It has nobody's paying money into that system other than to speculate on Atom and hopefully get some airdrops of some new shit token that's being launched next week, right? Like, that's it doesn't make any sense to say that you are buying an asset that has no value accrual and no demand for it whatsoever, really. No reasonable demand center for it. You're going to stake it onto a system that doesn't produce any of that revenue or value, and then you're going to continue to make money on top of that, just birthing money from fucking thin air. That's not how it works. You cannot birth or value in anywhere ever. Bitcoin doesn't do it. THORChain doesn't do it. The US government doesn't do it. Whenever you are minting new tokens, you are not minting value. You're just diluting something. The market cap of the dollar or Bitcoin or Rune is the same before a mint and as it is after a mint. They're just deflating the value of each individual like token or coin or dollar in this case. It's completely nonsensical. And if you're arguing that we should do something like that that doesn't actually make any economic sense and doesn't provide an actual value for anybody, I'm just not going to get on. I'm just not on board with that, right?
No.
Everything.
The opposite. I'm against dilution completely, but I would like to be kind of part of a node. But where am I going to go get 5 million? Because from what I understand, the node needs at least 1 million runes, and if somebody
Right.
cannot
So
afford to
right
become a
now
node,
that's all we have bond providing. So you can provide with like THORChain Bull is a kind of an example of somebody who runs nodes for others. As long as you have enough rune in your pocket, you can't do it if you get 10 rune. It's just not enough, skin in the game. I think the minimum that he does is like 50,000 rune or whatever. But like, there is no obligation here to provide you a rune on rune yield just because you like it, just because you want the false impression of making an income that you're not actually fucking making, like you are in the Atom case. You're not making an income. That money's coming from nowhere. Nobody's paying money to system to pay you jack shit. And we're not, and I don't want to do the same thing. I'm just providing a false yield and tell people, oh, hey, we get this yield, you get 10% per year, blah, 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 whatever the hell it is. No, in reality, it's actually like 0.9 because the money's coming from absolutely like, being minted from oblivion. Like, it doesn't make any sense. If you want to provide rune for a bond provider and provide security in that sense, all right, talk to the THORChain Bull, right? Or talk to get some friends together. Get enough rune together collectively that you can give enough, to run a node or give enough to THORChain Bull. But in order for us to offer a rune on rune yield, the yield has to come from somewhere. It cannot be minted. It just can't be just like a pure mint scenario. That just doesn't make any sense at all. It has no value to the protocol, the value to the users of the ecosystem, and it provides no value for anybody at all. So if you want to do that, great. Propose an idea, right? But it's not going to be just staking on some node and not actually contribute to security. That's just like a non-starter for me.
I got one point around this,
thank you
which
very
I was
much.
been thinking of recently, with chain flip and like their design, right? So this is sort of baked into the protocol itself, and then there's a company that does essentially wrapped staked flip, right? Where you provide to their nodes, they give you a yield bearing token, and you get some of the rewards. But inherently, what that does is it pushes the network to be run more and more by that one operator who runs all of those nodes. Like they own all the hardware, they run whatever code they want to run. Like you provide them your capital, but in the end of the, it's kind of what Chad was saying earlier about just you're the one that's in control. Like you run that box. Like no matter like if you delegate to one of those things, there's nothing you could do that could stop that person if they wanted to from doing whatever they want with their node and your stake that's with it. And inherently, it just makes the network more centralized by pushing people towards the provider who can just take up the most share of the network. And it's going to be the same. Like you don't want the network to become just three guys in a multi-sig. That's essentially what it becomes if there's like one or two ways to provide bond really easily. That one provider is just going to become that they're going to become the network. They're going to run the whole thing, and then it's not actually a decentralized system at all.
Exactly correct, right? He's right. So to use an analogy, if you go to a football game, right, or if you're Scottish, I think, so maybe soccer, European football. If you go to a game, if you go on the field, you are participating in the game, right, and you are
The
affecting the
pitch.
result. Right, you're on the pitch, you are affecting the game in one form or another, and you are the more people on the field, the more decentralized the game is in a matter of like kind of saying. But if you're not on the game, you're just in the stands. You paid money to buy a ticket, and you're sitting in the stands, and you're rooting for whatever your guy is on the field, number 17. You love him. You think number 17 is great on the field. You are not participating in the game. You're just cheering from the sidelines. You're not increasing the quality of the game. You're not increasing the centralization of the game. You're not making more goals. You're just on the fucking sidelines. That's what staking is in that context of like delegated staking. You're just sitting on the sidelines, but you're not. No one's going to pay you to sit in the sidelines of a football game or a soccer game. Like, no one's going to do that. It's because who the fuck would want to pay you to sit there and watch a football game? Like, it doesn't. You're not providing anything of value for anybody else in the world. So the whole idea is just so fucking stupid. But the industry is kind of like just excited about it because they don't understand that you just can't mint money from nowhere and make a bunch of money. I don't know. It should be a fairly obvious concept, but people do it all the time. People do the same thing with like when Sushi Swap came out and they started to like just mint a fucking sushi token, so you got extra yield from a sushi token. That doesn't actually fucking work, right? It doesn't work. You just can't just mint a token to oblivion and have no demand center to give it actual real value and just start printing it to fucking ever. Like people got so excited about it. It was the next biggest thing in fucking AMM, this liquidity mining, and everybody fucking did it. Sushi started it, and then Uni copied them, and then everybody else had some fucking moronic governance token that did absolutely nothing. That people got for free and just dumped it in the market. It's one of the worst tokens in the industry. It just you have to, if you want to have an asset that's actually valuable, you can't do it through just nonsensical economics that just gets people excited to just get free money that they're not actually getting that free money in the end. It's just like we need to get away from moronic economics where just people just think they're getting free money for nothing and then invest into an asset like fucking Atom or whatnot. It just annoys the hell out of me that people are still talking about nonsensical systems that don't actually provide value for anybody in the world and thinking they're going to become a millionaire because of it. You get the amount of money that you earn in your life is relative to the size of the problem that you're solving. If you want to flip burgers for your life, then you will not make a lot of money because the size of the problem that you're solving of flipping burgers is rather fucking small. And there's lots of people in the world who can flip a burger. It's not fucking hard. But if you want to solve cancer, if you want to solve, reusable rockets like SpaceX, that's a massive fucking problem, and you'll become Elon Musk, where you're worth, fucking $100 billion or some ludicrous amount. And if you want to think that you're going to become a millionaire or wealthy because you're going to be buying some arbitrary token that has no value and there's no economics whatsoever, and then stake it to earn more of a pointless token, get the fuck out of here. The only way you're going to make money from that system is a bunch of rubes come into it and buy it with you, like a fucking Dogecoin or meme coin that like you're just gambling on pop culture at that point, and you're not actually making an actual real investment. If you make money off of that, well, more power to you. Congratulations, you got fucking lucky as shit. But if you actually want to solve a problem and invest into an asset that actually solves a problem that makes a lot of money because the problem that you're solving is massively large, like, for example, cross-chain swaps, like example lending, like example earning, and the things that we do as a protocol, then you will make some fucking good money because you're actually providing and solving a problem for the world. But if you're not going to be solving a problem for the world, you probably won't make much money. And if you do, you're lucky as shit.
Yo, Pluto, what's up, man? Welcome back.
How's it going? Merry Christmas, guys. Merry Christmas, Chad. Merry Christmas, Cal.
Merry Christmas, dude. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year. I'm just listening. This is good shit. Super bass, Chad.
Chad's like on one right now, and I don't even know what propelled him to like ramp it up to that level, but I gotta say, I'm just enjoying. I'm loving being here.
Yeah, a bit going off the rails here, but it's just like it just goes back to the annoyance that I have about the industry as a whole and the dumb shit that we just throw money like massive amounts like into, whether it's fucking Ohm token or all this just nonsensical bullshit that doesn't do anything, that will never do anything, never intended to do anything, and people still think they're gonna, take $1,000 and become a millionaire in 6 months because of it. And if you are, then if it does happen, then you basically rugged everybody else, and congratulations, you just took money from a bunch of other rubes who thought they were going to make a lot of money and then end up losing it all. Like I just want to see this industry move beyond this horse shit and actually get to a place where it's like, well, how do we produce value? How do we just offer something that people want to spend money to use, right? Whether that be swaps or loans or what have you, like to actually empower people's fucking lives and allow them to do things they can't do yesterday. Do that, and you'll actually produce an asset that's valuable. I don't care about the fucking rune on rune yield. Who gives a shit about that? I know people like it because they want to get rich. Or they think they want to get rich. But how about you just get rich just by making a good investment choice? Whatever happened to that?
Here,
Preach,
here.
preach.
I have a couple questions. Is that okay if I ask?
Shoot.
Hey, Merry Christmas, guys. Happy New Year. I hope you guys are getting lots of rest. I know between Binance Smart Chain and AVAX, you guys are probably pulling your hair out. So kudos to you guys. I have two questions actually come from the community, just what I get a lot. First question is, I know you guys have been dealing with the AVAX and the Binance Smart Chain stuff. Is there a time frame on the cloud ranking system for arbitrage bots? And I like Pluto being up here. If there's any updates on Solana, I get a lot of Solana questions. Thanks, guys.
Yeah, we're gonna try to get Swapper Cloud out like right after we get the mainnet instability issues addressed. So specifically AVAX right now. Binance Smart Chain has been pretty stable since we rolled out some performance fix for it, but we're still having trouble with AVAX, like basically scheduling transactions and then them getting sent into the ether and either chilling in the mempool or not ever making it into like a validator mempool at all, which obviously causes problems for THORChain if it can't, reliably broadcast out transactions. So as soon as we get that addressed, we'll be able to unhalt AVAX and then unhalt the churn, and then mainnet will be 100% operational again, and then we can resume the vote for Swapper Clout. I know Chad's anxious to get that out, and we also have to, I think in 126, we don't have to wait until that gets in to enable Swapper Cloud, but I think we did have to wait for 126 to enable AVAX anyway, and in 126 we'll be able to finish the store migration that we started to apply the Swapper Cloud values retroactively to all the traders that have traded. What was the time frame on that in the last like year or 2 years?
I think the time that we collected for the Swapper Cloud initial values was 2 years, but I'm not. Orion would know better than I.
Nice. So do you want to just explain what that means? What that means for like existing swappers and their Swapper Cloud?
Yeah, it just means that we did an analysis of how much Rune each individual address has paid in fees over the last like couple of years, and that becomes your initial, however quantity in Rune that is, that becomes your initial value of your Swapper Cloud number. And that's really important because if we started from zero, then it would take 6 months or a year before we actually saw some like the value of Swapper Cloud actually manifest and actually provide faster trades and whatnot. So we had to do something similar to that just to kind of kick the numbers off at a non-zero value so that it's actually doing something, providing a benefit for the protocol. But that could be done, enabled at any time. Like, nodes could vote on that right now if they really wanted to, and enable it today. We're just not trying to like spread ourselves too thin by trying to like move too many pieces on the chessboard at the same time. I just want to make sure we get stability in the network before we start adding, running new features that hypothetically could have some sort of bug or issue with them, and then have another fire to deal with.
Exactly. And then as for Solana, so here's the latest on that. Basically, we have a independent, like a third-party team that's doing the EDDSA fork of TSS for us. So they've agreed to, well, we basically contracted them to complete the EDDSA implementation that's required to do signing for Solana chain. I think Cardano, a bunch of others use EDDSA. So yeah, basically that needs to get done first, and then we have Kudelski, who did our most recent ECDSA audit. We have them lined up to start auditing that as soon as the implementation has been accepted. So we're parallel pathing that with a bunch of other work. And then in terms of the Solana nodes and how we'll like get node operators to run that, there's a pretty like decently detailed thread on that in Discord ongoing right now. But I think we'll wait to kind of like make any decisions about how that's going to work. So debate is still ongoing about that. But other than that, it should be just a matter of like making some changes to Bifrost to support vaults of multiple types. So there's a bit of like groundwork on the actual THORChain side, but other than that, it's pretty much a EVM fork with just some minor differences. So I think what the goal is to get. I'm thinking I don't even need to wait until the official like EDDSA implementation that we'll use is done and audited, because we can just use the Binance chains upstream EDDSA lib in development. So this is getting pretty technical, but basically like we're gonna try to get a Solana vaults running on StageNet, or like get a PR up for that as soon as possible, so that we can just like get that built and running on StageNet, so we can start to see how like basically like put ourselves under the gun operationally, so that we have to like we basically want to have to support Solana for a couple months before we think it would be like safe to add it to mainnet. So like by putting it on StageNet, it'll force us to like deal with the issues that would arise from like a production instance of Solana running on THORChain, just because it makes me super nervous. Like it's a massive chain. I think just operationally running it is going to be difficult for node operators. So I just want to get some experience internally running it on the StageNet, and see how like difficult it is before we like provide any sort of like real time frame. But I think getting it running on THORChain StageNet within like the next couple months is doable, through a number of like we can basically like take shortcuts on certain things in the meantime, just to get it like tested and working. But the path to mainnet, I think, has a lot more open discussion, and it'll need to be bacon StageNet for at least, I said, 3 to 5 months. So I'm hoping like sometime in 2024 we get it in, but there's really no promises.
I don't think it's an EVM fork, by the way. So I think it would be a completely new chain client that'd have to be written from scratch to support this.
You'd have to like do some, yeah, there's different like methods, and the way that they interact with like the data structures is different, but it is like ETH client compatible. So all the libraries that you can use to like call the ETH RPC are the same. So it would probably not be like a full rewrite, but yeah, it is fairly different in like how you like, they don't have a concept of transaction receipts. It kind of is all on the transaction, but so that makes it easier and harder in some ways.
I mean, personally, I'm quite nervous around Solana. Not that I'm anti-Solana or anything like this, or trying to throw shade or anything, but it's well known that Solana is a very operationally operationally problematic, right? They've had a lot of stalls and issues, and when that happens, that's going to create issues for us, and specifically for like Pluto and Ursa and other people and myself who are, running this protocol and have to deal with all that downstream fucking disaster shit. And then we also have the problem of running a Solana node is extremely fucking complex and extremely expensive. And we have to convince, 105, nodes more or less to run this infrastructure, which is going to be very expensive. And to be honest, I sincerely doubt that Solana would come anywhere close to the amount of revenue that it would have to generate in order to compensate the nodes for the amount of capital they're going to have to spend to do so. It's going to operate at a loss to validators, to be honest with you. And that's obviously not a good idea. And we've already seen that be the case on Binance Smart Chain, right? And we don't really have a lot of volume passing through it, and it is a relatively expensive chain to operate. And I don't think it's actually generating enough revenue to support the validators and the costs they're doing. And then we're also seeing significant operational issues with Binance Smart Chain, as Pluto can tell you more detail than I can about how much that chain is just operated like by a bunch of kids, who don't know what the fuck they're doing. And so like I think Solana is going to be so expensive to add, both in support for EDDSA and running a new chain client, and then the running of it and all these things and the operational issues and I'm quite nervous about adding it. I'm not against it or anything like that. I'm just saying that like it just looks like it's going to be kind of a disaster to me, to be honest with you.
Yeah, I'm in the same boat. I think it's gonna that's why I kind of want to like put ourselves under the gun by doing it on StageNet, because that will surface, just how difficult it will be to keep it running. Like if we can't even keep it running in StageNet, there's no point in even trying to get it in mainnet. And so I'll have like a better sort of
Yeah,
summary of like what the pains are when we've had some time to like run it in the test environment for a bit. But yeah, I share all of the same, concerns as you. And it does suck that like today, in order to churn, all chains have to be, 100% operational. And that's caused issues for our node operators already. And so I'm going to tell them like, hey, when you vote for like Solana, you're basically voting to have more incidents like what's happening with AVAX right now, where we can't churn the chain because AVAX is halted because of, fucking inscriptions on AVAX. Like it's just causing, record transactions through their C chain. Like you have to just take into account that any, THORChain is basically at the mercy of the stability or like, yeah, the stability and performance of any of its downstream chains. And so, yeah, for the same reason, Solana makes me really nervous. I think if there would be one saving grace, is we could do like a routerless implementation where it only checks like L1 transactions to the Asgard vault on THORChain and not deal with any of like the smart contract calls or interactions. And that would, potentially make it more performant, but like I have to mess around with the implementation more before I can, make a judgment on that. But I think like even just like with other chains, we've considered doing that. Luckily, we got ourselves out of shit creek with Binance Smart Chain because they like just added actually no, it was Ethereum just added the ability to get block receipts.
yeah,
Before you had to fetch them all individually. It's like the stupidest pattern ever. Whoever wrote like the Ethereum like data structure never had in mind like that people would be running, I don't know, literally any app that consumes like blockchain data, like block explorers, indexers, our bots, like everyone needs to read receipts. And so like the fact that they weren't included on like the block is just like insane in the first place. But I'm just ranting about technical details now.
yeah. Well, I'm okay. I'm okay with us kind of investigating more on the Solana thing. I think it's going to be much more difficult to actually support than we think it's going to be, and I think it's going to be a real risk of it being a fucking dumpster fire in some sense. Do you know what I mean? But
Yeah,
and to be honest, like I don't think adding chains is really going to offer a lot more value to the protocol. Like I think there's a tendency in the community to think that we could add more chains and it adds more value and we get more trade volume and more this and more of
it
that.
did with.
And
I mean, it did with Luna.
it did with Luna's case, and that was obviously a unique one. But like,
Yeah,
if you just look at Coinbase or Binance and their spot trading volumes, it's fucking 80 something percent just Bitcoin and ETH, and there's a
yeah,
huge trail off of a bunch of random tokens, and so just like you know, the more chains we add, the more complexity we're adding to the protocol in some ways, the more maintenance we have, the more outages we have, the more time is burned of like myself and Pluto to put out the fires of these other chains and whatnot. It's just like let's stay focused on the things that'll actually drive value to the protocol. And I think that's things like integrations, right? Which what Nine Realms is doing and doing well. That's like limit orders, in my opinion, and what does that, and validating lending, that the lending design works as we suspect or like it to work or whatever. And like there are things we can do that just produce more value into the protocol, than like Solana or some random chain, to be honest with you.
Chad, I had a question on kind of that point.
Shoot.
Um, I think one of the things that really attracted me to THORChain early on was the whole non-KYC layer one swap.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm curious if you guys have flirted with the idea of, on-ramp and off-ramping directly, using the protocol in some way. And if that interests you guys, because if there was just curious what your thoughts are on that piece.
Yeah, my thought is no, because whenever you do an on ramps and on ramps, I'm assuming you're referring to fiat. there's always going to be a point of centralization somewhere that's actually doing all that. And I'm in no way, shape, or form do I want myself or probably not even Nine Realms to become some sort of like on or off ramp. It's just dipping a toe into a world that is not what we do, right?
Yeah, no, understandable. And then I had kind of a follow up then on when you guys evaluate chains, like you're saying most of the volume, might be on Ethereum, Bitcoin, 80%. I haven't looked into it too much, but I know there's layer two talk around Bitcoin now, like BRC20 or something like that. I'm just curious, when do you guys prioritize like a layer two versus an L1 or L2 versus L1, and what do you guys tend to think is the better ROI?
I mean, that's a good question in general. My personal stance on something like BRC20 is that like BRC20 is a relatively new concept. It's not been around for a very long time. It could be a flavor of the week for all we know, and maybe it's got some staying power. Who knows? But even BRC20 is actually not part of the core protocol of Bitcoin. It only exists because some of the miners choose to run a modified version of Bitcoin Core that supports this cool BRC20 fucking NFT shit that you see on ordinals and that kind of stuff that we see on Bitcoin. So because it's not really part of the actual core protocol of Bitcoin, that makes me a little bit, reticent to engage in such things, especially if it's really new. And I think that's going to be one of the challenges in general of this community is to not just go ahead and chase everything that's shiny and new in the industry. Everything that's being talked about on random YouTube influencers, whatever. Like we should be thinking more long term and investing into protocols that have been around for a while, that have shown their value, have shown their they contribute to the space in one form or another, and they've shown growth and run their infrastructure in a non-shitty fucking way, for example. You could even make the argument that we shouldn't add anything unless it's gone through a full bear and a full bull market first before you can even start talking about adding a new chain, or adding a new BRC20 thing or whatever. Even like Lightning Network, I wouldn't do just because the volume on Lightning Network is so fucking small right now. One day it'll be massive, to be honest with you. I think probably in 10 years it'll be quite large. But even Lightning Network is just like the liquidity is so small, it just wouldn't be worth the time that it would take to support it, for myself or Pluto or one of us to build that client and integrate and then take up more cap space in our security of the network on an asset that doesn't have much volume. Like we have to be more strategic in how we think about these things.
Cool. Yeah. I was going to ask also, I know there was a question around like making the Rune token do more, and I was super agreed with kind of your stance. But on the lending side, is Rune not involved in the lending side of THORChain? Just curious what that. Maybe you can explain it again at a high level.
Not really. I mean, it's involved with the derived assets, and it's involved within the context of that. But it's not. The loans aren't coming from Rune deposits from various people that create the liquidity to be able to open loans and such. So Rune's not. I mean, it's involved indirectly. I'd say not involved directly.
Is there a world where that it could take a bigger role? You see that the Rune token itself take a bigger role, or?
I think it's taking as big of a role that it can take. I mean, you could make an argument that we could open up loans so that Rune could be used as the collateral instead of just Bitcoin and ETH, which is what it is today. But the reason why we don't do that though is because the whole point of the feature is to drive value into the protocol, drive value into the Rune asset. And if you're using Rune as collateral, then you're not really creating any buy pressure on the Rune asset. You're actually creating net sell pressure, technically. You might cause positive burn pressure, but you're probably going to be creating net sell pressure on the Rune asset, which is obviously not the direction we want to be going. So we don't allow Rune as a collateral asset, and I don't expect us to ever enable Rune as a collateral asset in the network. That's the only way you could get Rune to be more involved in the process than it already is. And I don't think that would be very beneficial to the protocol, to be honest with you. Although I would personally love it, because then I could take a bunch of my Rune that I personally hold and open a loan with it, and then, spend it on, something, or a car, fucking whatever. It would be beneficial for me personally, but putting my kind of economics hat on, and not thinking about my own personal, what's good for me as an individual, thinking about what's good for the protocol, it doesn't make sense to allow Rune as a collateral asset.
Yeah, no, thank you. That was super insightful.
Yeah.
Have you ever thought about Rune as a collateral asset, but with so because Rune is the pair in every single pool, you could essentially liquidate positions if they start to get unaligned with like the health of the protocol, and like minting more Rune essentially. So like I feel like it'd be interesting to explore something like Rune loans, but you could liquidate them at a certain point where so that the health isn't a problem, that like the economic part of this isn't really a factor, because you just have to manage a position like you would on other protocols, where it's neutral to the protocol itself but provides a value to people that actually use THORChain.
Yeah, but then the question becomes of like, why would the protocol do this? What benefit does the protocol get by doing a Rune loans with liquidation? Like, what is the actual value that it gets?
Yeah, so if it's like in this example, like if it's a 50% LTV, you liquidate when it reaches 110% of the collateral value or something like that, and the protocol profits whatever that 10% of Rune value is. So you put in a position in whatever asset, and then it just liquidates to to a position where the protocol wouldn't be minting more Rune back in that scenario, because it just liquidates at a higher margin
Yeah,
than that.
but the problem with that is that Rune as an asset is relatively small, right? Its market cap is relatively small to Ethereum and Bitcoin and whatnot. So the demand for Rune loans, Rune collateral loans, is really just local to us, as in us in this community. Nobody cares, gives a shit outside of this Twitter Spaces, effectively. And then the question becomes, well, how often are we actually going to liquidate, and what kind of amounts are we going to be liquidating? And in general, it's probably not going to be that much. We don't see liquidations happening on Aave or Compound. Like, it's not, I mean, it happens all the time, but it's not humongous amounts, at least not in my opinion. So then it becomes like the amount of value we're contributing, like we're just collecting that 10% out of the 110% liquidation and putting that 10% into the reserve, I guess, right? And increasing revenue from the reserve. Okay, I mean, that's something, but it's not going to be a huge driver of value into the Rune asset or the network as a whole, in my opinion. But maybe I'm wrong about that. Like, I'm not even sure if it's worth the cost of doing it and writing the code and maintaining the code and worrying about creating TWAP oracles and this kind of stuff. Like, that's not a small amount of work. And the question just becomes: is it worth the additional risk to the protocol? Do we get the revenue? Is the ROI worth the cost? Is the ROI worth the risk? Is the ROI worth the maintenance and all the time required to do it? And in this case, my knee jerk reaction is that's not. Maybe other people can disagree with me, but for me, it just doesn't make enough sense to do it. Not to mention that like Kraken could do that. Kraken can do Rune loans, right? If they wanted to, and they're not doing it because it's probably just not enough demand to make it worthwhile.
Yeah, for sure. I think there's a protocol or two that does Rune loans or yield or something like that.
Yeah, we can look at those protocols and see what the demand is. And my guess, and I obviously don't know, I'm just making a guess out of thin air here, but so it's going to be one of the least liquid lending things within that lending protocol, and it just doesn't make a whole lot of sense. Versus using Bitcoin as collateral or ETH as collateral, we're talking about $50 billion, $100 billion of like how how many loans existed in Celsius and BlockFi and Voyager? Like we're talking about what, 30, 40, 50 billion dollars of Bitcoin loans? I mean, we're talking about huge fucking numbers, orders of magnitude larger than our entire market cap of Rune itself. So if we can capture even 10% of that kind of CeFi Bitcoin loans that we saw in the last, bull market, we're talking about, people 10, 30, $20 billion of Rune being just bought off the spot market and burned out of existence. And that can have huge effects theoretically. That can have humongous effects to, accruing value into the network and accruing value into Rune.
Chad, how do you capture 10%? Is it the integrations with these other partners who have the front ends, or like how do you market it?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think it's part of it's integrations in convincing, Kraken or other, whomever to interface and provide interfaces for people to do Bitcoin loans with THORChain. I think that's part of it. But I also think, to be fair, objective, that because this lending system is so novel and experimental, I think people will rightfully so be weary of it or cautious about it, right? Because it is so different and it is so new. And to be fair, you need time for this system to prove its legitimacy, to prove that it stands on its own 2 feet, and that it's not going to collapse to an oblivion or whatever. And the only way you can do that is just time. It's just kind of let people use it. You just put a small cap on it like we have now. Let people open loans, close loans. We can study the behavior of the market in various conditions and scenarios. We can, legitimize or illegitimize the design just by watching how it performs with the market over the next, year or two or whatever, right? And so it's going to take a long time to get there. But once you're there, once you've proven that the system works, which let's assume that's the case for the time being, then you've now produced a lending system for Bitcoin, which doesn't exist anywhere else in the world, that is fully decentralized, that is non-KYC'd and completely permissionless. And it's a better lending offer than what BlockFi, Celsius, and Voyager were offering them before by a fucking goddamn landslide. So it would be a much better product and a much more decentralized product and a much more honest and transparent product than we've ever seen in history. And because of that, my assumption is that the industry would, very much like that and engage with it very heavily. But we need time to prove its legitimacy.
Yeah, assume it works out flawlessly, which is my hope. Wouldn't just you need a startup to basically offer what Celsius was offering essentially, but just built on top of this design, and they just reap the benefits that Celsius and all these other guys who imploded.
Sure, they could totally do that. Yeah,
to it. Yeah, wow.
Anybody could do this. Like if you wanted to, you could build your own Bitcoin loan system called Chad's Loan System, and I'm going to use THORChain in the background, but I'm going to charge 3% interest rate or 5% interest rate on my loans. Right? I'm just wrapping what THORChain's doing and giving you your loan, whatever the hell it is, and then gaining 5%, on that thing, and just free fucking money for me. You know what I mean? Like I ain't doing shit. I'm just broadcasting Bitcoin transactions and then getting out the other side and then just like charging a 5% interest on top of what THORChain's doing. And maybe one day somebody will actually do something like that, right? And then and then people won't question that, like they're questioning THORChain, because they just assume it's just another TradFi, CeFi lending system, and then just like they don't ask questions, they just open loans and get on with it. And you can support fiat in that case, which is like another benefit of being able to do that, wrapping THORChain, which would be cool. But people would question THORChain more vigorously because it is decentralized and it is software and there are rules and there are this and that, and people should, to be honest with you, like people should be questioning THORChain's lending design, to be fair, and they should they should question it, they should participate in it, they should learn about it, and they can challenge it, whatever it is, and just see if it works or doesn't. But people won't question. A new BlockFi is going to pop up at some point, and no one's going to question it. It's just going to be like, cool, Everybody's on board.
That kind of reminds me, Chad. We're gonna wrap up here after this, but I pinned a tweet up on top. But Lens, one of the interfaces that does THORChain lending, we're doing a Twitter space with them on January 4th. So you can, tap that tweet and RSVP to it if you want to hear about Lens. I think they're doing a IDO or something. I'm honestly not sure what they're doing, but they're gonna come up here and we're gonna talk with their team because I don't think they've really talked much to the community at all. So
Yeah, that's gonna be great. I have that marked in my calendar as well.
sweet, cool. Yeah, it'll be good to have you here for that. So yeah, sounds good. Sorry, we'll cut it here, but thanks for coming up, guys. Merry Christmas, Happy New Year. We'll see y'all next year.
Later, Kyle. Later, guys.
Peace out.
All right, see ya.